one, and if so, did you question why they changed it to jelly donut?
Okay, so I mentioned that earlier today. One of the reasons that a lot of the stuff in the show was toned down in terms of the ethnic side of it was because, yes, that show was purchased from Japan to be redubbed in English, but then also to be redubbed in multiple languages. The Japanese would do a show and have a small audience that spoke Japanese. And maybe sometimes they'd go off to a couple of other countries, but that's it. They relied on companies like 4Kids and things like that to take their products and relicense them to make them a worldwide show. So to have sushi draws attention to the fact that it's a Japanese show. So they wanted it to be a food product, same thing with the signs in the show, that could easily be changed into other foods for different countries, Germany, France, things like that. So now, of course, we know sushi is all over the world, but there's probably more countries that have donuts than serve rice balls. So that's why those things are changed. They could have changed the animation a little bit better to support that, which we had to do on a lot of shows. In the States, we have very, very strict laws about Saturday morning cartoons and the visuals and content that we can show for children. When Saturday mornings actually had cartoons on them, they don't really have them anymore. Each network has a part of their company called the Broadcast Standards and Practices. So every show, every visual, every piece of dialogue, every character has to go through the filter of that person. So you might be the one person who is the BSMP person for Fox or for the WB. So your choice of what you think is appropriate or not is personal. There's no guidelines. It's what you think. So we would present every show to them, and they would say, we got to give it to our BSMP person, and that BSMP person would come back with notes. So we had shows like when we first started working with One Piece, I said, this show will never air the way it is. It's going to be so much work. And why? Because of the violence, swords, stuff. And we even had a show, an episode in One Piece, where all of the characters were on crucifixes in the field. And we had fans going, why didn't you use the original footage? I mean, what's the deal? Well, if you want to go rent the DVD of that, go ahead. But in America, if you show 100 people on crosses, that's not going to help your advertising, and you're going to offend too many people. So we had to change them to cat's eyes, like that. So that took a lot of reworking the graphics. So rice balls, things like that, all of those things, everything got changed also because of the rules of engagement. So that's why the rice balls thing was there, for sort of making it sort of a more generic food product. But we had to change a lot of stuff that was not our choice. James at one point pointed a gun at someone's head. And there was like, I don't understand why you didn't keep that. Well, we can't really show that. Yes, Roadrunner tried to, was almost killed by like anvils left and right, but the chances that little Johnny is going to go into the shop and find an anvil to throw at his little brother is probably less than little Johnny going to his dad's closet and finding a gun and pointing at his little brother's head. That's the mentality behind it, so there's none of that stuff. So that's why a lot of the visuals are changed on actual broadcast television. But the food thing is that.
For me, it's a two-per question. First, I'll go for the bigger one first. How did it feel going from an admittedly small-time production like Slayers, which, although is a cult classic, is just basically something sort of a niche anime would watch, to basically the mega monstrous, gigantic phenomenon that's basically comparable to Minecraft today of Pokemon? How did it go from that to that? Like, how did you feel from that?
Well, that's a good question. So every show I've ever auditioned for, the person that's running the casting session says the same thing. This is going to be the biggest show ever. This is going to be bigger than anything ever made. We've got the best writers, the animation, we've got toys. It's going to be huge. So just like that, when we walked in to do the audition for Pokemon, this is going to be huge, it's going to be great. We're like, yeah, I've heard that before. So it's always the same thing. For every Pokemon I've auditioned for, there's been 50 shows that have said the same thing. Now, of course, after working on Pokemon, they now substitute it's going to be the biggest show ever to it's going to be bigger than Pokemon. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into an audition where they're like, this show is going to be bigger than Pokemon. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just not. It's like, it might be a very popular show, but it's not. And the reason that you can't say that anymore is, and yes, it's very, very cool to be part of pop culture history. I definitely don't take that for granted. But there's a reason that a show like that is so successful. And there is a formula. It is not a magical formula. If there are characters in a show that someone can relate to, not every character, but at least one character that each person can relate to in an ensemble cast. We've all seen shows that are successful like that, even on, like Friends. Oh, I hated Joey, but I like Chandler, right? Or I could relate to his sarcasm. That's funny, but she's annoying. Whatever it is, right? There's someone in the cast of characters that you like. If the show has that, there are redeeming qualities about someone in there, or you can relate to them. Plus, the other side of it is, the marketing has to have product. If your toys are cool, and your video games are cool, all of that stuff is there, the show will last forever. I've asked people, have you watched Pokemon recently? And they'll say, no, I stopped watching years ago. And I say, well, have you played the game? Oh, I play it every day. They got you, because the product is there. So there's been shows that I've worked on where the show is great, but the games and the toys and the cards are not. And the show might be even better than Pokemon, but because the other stuff is not in place, the show gets canceled. Because advertisers want to be paying for time on a show that's doing well, that's selling products. So yes, it was very shocking to go from Slayers to a show like Pokemon. But when I got hired to direct Yu-Gi-Oh! And I walked into the studio and they showed me the first episode, I said, this is going to be a hit show. And they were like, yeah, everybody says that. I said, no, because this is Pokemon 90210. This is the same formula for everyone who's too old for Pokemon. And it has redeeming qualities about different characters, cool gameplay, there's cards in place, there's video games, all of this stuff lined up. This will be a big show. And basically, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at those two companies and their two properties, it's Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Are two of the biggest anime franchises in history. Ratings as well. We're talking about TV ratings, not DVD stuff. And then the toys that go along with it, that generate income. So that's, that's the fun part about saying, yeah, it's great. It was great to make that jump, but I hear it all the time. So it was a surprise, but it's not a surprise to me now because that formula works. And you know what I mean?
And
so
the second question was, do you remember like the voice direction or sort of your inspiration for voice of Mennonite from the Kirby Right Back At You series?
Yeah, they asked me to come up with a Clint Eastwood voice, and I was working as Kaiba at the same time, and I said, I don't want to do the same voice that I'm doing for that, so let me do it as Antonio Banderas.
Oh, all right.
And so they thought, that's kind of a strange idea, that he's Spanish, and I said, well, let's try it. And so we went with it.
Okay.
Yeah.